Imagine a world where AI can solve the impossible. Welcome to the quantum revolution set to transform the future. Today, we're diving into the top 3 quantum stocks to watch this week. And just so you guys know, by the way, we just closed the virtual stock trading system last night at midnight. So if you missed out, don't worry, hit the first link in the description to get on the list for next time. Let's jump into it. I'm going to show you guys the top 3 stocks that we're looking at for this week. So the first one that we're going to be looking at here is Rigetti stock. So Rigetti's number 1. The next one I want to drop in here is QBTS. And then the next one we're going to look at here is IONQ. The other ones are definitely, they're on this list for a reason. Some of them have hardware, some of them have software. You could include large cap like Microsoft, Google. Of course, we could include NVIDIA, but we're going to talk about the smaller companies that those big large cap companies invest in and see as the innovators in the space. Now, to start it off, you can see a lot of these stocks kind of sold off on Friday, but overall, they have been really uptrending, and the past few months have been significantly increased. So you can see, just for example, if we're in Rigetti, it was at 70 cents and it went up to $21 in a matter of 3 months. QBTS, it was at 87 cents, it went up to $11 in a matter of a few months. And IONQ, it was basically at $6 and it went up to $54 in a matter of a few months. Why these stocks? Why are these the ones that we're choosing? Well, these are the ones that are seeing the most interest from large cap and institutions. So we could talk about the market of these companies, and that's what I'd like to show you first. So for example, if we look at you guys could follow my Instagram there. It's showing up. Institutional investments in Rigetti stock. Let's start it off there. So if you guys are familiar, quantum computing is going to be one of the main focuses to be an innovator for AI, because the computation power of quantum computers will allow us to solve problems that seem basically impossible to do with classical computers only. But by focusing on using quantum computers, AI will be able to solve problems we never even thought possible. I mean, there's a lot of examples where it's already happening in drug discovery, in improving battery efficiency, and looking at computations in electrons, and actually learning how to shift and change things on a quantum level. So it's kind of like the LED in your phone that's lighting me right now. I mean, there's some outside light, but a couple years ago, if you would have told somebody that you could touch the light and not get burned, they would think you are crazy. But hey, look at us now with this quantum tech. It's all around us. It's in the LED screen. At CES, one of my favorite things was the clear glass that has HD images on it that are showing up. And when you turn off the image, it's completely clear. You don't see anything. And then it's literally a sticker that can show HD just through a clear, transparent sticker. Those are the types of things that I think are going to change. I always used to say, I think phones are going to be glass, just a piece of glass we hold, and you won't be able to see any of the tech inside it. Hey, I think we're going to get there. But anyway, those are some of the cool innovations with quantum. The companies that are backing and expecting a lot of those innovations to continue are companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, you got State Street, as well as JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. These are things that you look for. Is what company? You got Bank of America, Charles Schwab. What are some of the big institutional investors? Now, a lot of times we're looking at companies that haven't gotten this institutional investment. And guess what? We started covering Rigetti stock back in November. If you can notice, a lot of these investments happened in December of 2024. So keep this in mind right at the end of the year. And what happened? Part of what made this such a great thing to cover the past few months is because if we started covering here, look at the surge that we've seen happen since we started covering. And why did we start covering? It's the same reason we start looking at NVIDIA before they blew up. It's because if they're powering Tesla, if they're powering Apple, but Apple and Tesla, they might be what everybody's seeing, but people aren't seeing the underlying tech that's actually driving the innovation. And so that's why there was such an undervalued period of time for NVIDIA, that before it filled that value gap of mainstream people uncovering the value, those investors that recognize that value early were able to capitalize on that value tremendously. And so what I'm saying is we got to get in before a lot of these big investors, and we have some long-term positions in our Charles Schwab. It's funny, Charles Schwab is here, that we're holding in these quantum computing companies. And it's so important to look at this because now it's showing mainstream validity in the industry. So just keep that in mind. So when we check out Rigetti, the other thing that we're going to check out here is, if you're not familiar with quantum computers, make sure to go check out their website because it'll show you the breakdowns 1, 2, and 3, the signal chain, the temperature stages, the mixing chamber, and then of course down to the QPU, where this is where some of the magic happens. This is where you would drop in your Google Willow chip or drop in your new Microsoft chip. There was a really, really great thing I just recently posted on my Instagram story that showed, it wasn't my post, it was a repost, but it basically showed the new Microsoft chip that got released and how it would be so tiny in comparison to the quantum computer and everything else that's going into it. I thought that was really cool. So anyway, this is a company that if you want to learn more about, go to their website. They're partnered with NASA. So you can see Oxford Instruments, Q-Control, you got AWS, Microsoft, and others as your distribution channel. And that's something that's important, is they're being used through the cloud. So you can use these quantum computers through the cloud. Not only that, let's check out the financials. So we're kind of going through this in a pace that will give you an overall broad view of the company. And then we'll talk about what we could see here in the near future. So I'm going to talk about financials, Rigetti. You could see that the past few quarters, we've seen this increase. December had a net income of negative 12 million. This is a negative 20 million, negative 12 million again, negative 14 million. But when you look at the year over year on the net income, it is increasing. You see that's up 33%. So that's a good news. Revenue still down 23%. The net profit margins increased 12%, but again, they're still negative. And the cash on hand, they got a couple years of runway because they have investors like Nvidia, Microsoft, all of those institutional investors that I just showed you. And they have some things to worry about too. Their cost of revenue, they're not looking too pretty. They're burning through a little bit of cash, and you can see that they're missing their earnings per share as well as their revenue. I think we're buying what could be, and we've said that before. And the reason that it's no secret that it's still a valuable company is the same reason that you could look at Nvidia when they weren't turning massive profits and they were still building out their data centers. You know, it's the same thing. Like, I think this is a company that's still building out their quantum computers. When they start to get used, it are having massive computing from multiple companies. They're based in Berkeley there, as you can see, in San Francisco, or near San Francisco. So they're right in Silicon Valley. They're right there, or right near Silicon Valley, and most likely will have a lot of partnerships that continue to happen related to some of the innovation happening here in California. So I'm in California right now. We're looking out at some beautiful trees, starting to see the sunrise. It's so beautiful. Got up early here on the Saturday. Got up at 5 a.m. this morning, and I was like, it took me a while to get into a mode where we could film this video. But then I got to read some news about some of these companies, got really excited, and I want to share it with you guys. So as we look at the trends for Rigetti stock, you can see that the continuation of the stock is starting to get to a point where it's maybe continuing pattern. Now, we've had some sell-offs take place. For example, right here was the Fed announcement that there would be less rate cuts than anticipated. Investors didn't like that. That's a broader market sell-off. Here's a sell-off that was happening starting back in beginning of January. While this is something that looks like, oh, wow, it sold off a lot, two things make this up. Half of this, or about 75% of this, is due to the comments from NVIDIA CEO saying that quantum computing is 10, 15 years away, which in the next company, I'll show you guys why that's not true at all. And why a lot of people realize that, I'm not really sure why that was said. There's a lot of speculation around whether they wanted to get better prices. That doesn't seem ethical, and I wouldn't see that as the reason why he made those comments. To me, it just seemed like there wasn't a lot of context around. He might be right if he's talking about finding gravitational equations that will allow us to manipulate gravity. Yeah, that's a different, like, maybe that's a lot further out. But as far as real use cases with quantum computers, definitely happening right now. I mean, I have something on my screen right now that's talking about a quantum computing company working with MasterCard. And we know they're working with Microsoft. This company is actually plug-inable with AWS as well. You can find it over here in the cloud. A lot of companies like Netflix and Robinhood run on AWS. So anyway, this here is the trend, and the continuation for Rigetti would show indication that we could see it continue this trend, especially after it holding this level here that it recently dropped to. If it's in an overall downtrend, sure, we could see it sell back down. It's not gonna, it's gonna break pattern. What you like to see is an overall upward direction. I don't imagine that the company is going to lose too much momentum here as we start to get some really good conferences coming up. So there's a lot of indication that there would be some catalysts here in the near future. This trend right here could be imminent. I could see that happening. And the overall Fibonacci retracements is showing from here to here. If we get up to previous highs, that's what we could anticipate. See, kind of drop this like that. It's showing that if confirmation that this thing would continue up, would actually seeing it bounce right here. The golden ratio is where you'd want to purchase. We go from the top down to the nearest biggest low, which would be right here. And then you go up to where you would potentially see it going to. And Fibonacci sequence basically says if it's breaking back up above $11.50, that could potentially be where we would see a buy. So right now it's kind of selling off, and it is at a critical point if it's going to keep its trend. So we'll see how it holds on Monday. And again, if you guys want to join me at Market Open Stockmate, we go live each morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to see our entries and exits in these companies, it's the second link down below. So that's what we got for Rigetti stock. Really like it. It's at $10. Potentially could see it get back to this $20 range, just be a slower and steady increase. Right now it's at a critical point. We'll see how it reacts. Most likely I could see it bounce here and continue its direction. IONQ. IONQ is a company that had the same sell-offs around the same periods of time. You can see this was that Fed sell-off in mid-December. Here was that sell-off that happened in Jensen's comments. Now, I remember last time I said it was about 60 or 70% because of Jensen's comments. I didn't tell you what the other 30% was. The other 30% most likely is from just the wider spread market sell-off. If you click on a company like Nvidia and you go back over the last 3 months, you could see from basically January, we could call it beginning of January 7th, was the high, and it sold down all the way until February 3rd. So if we go, that's making up a big portion of the market. If we go to that January 7th was right here, that was the high for Quantum, and it sold down as well. And that's part of the sell-off is wider spread S&P 500 sold off the past month as well. So that's the other 30%, I would imagine. Now, here's the thing with our technical analysis on IONQ. Actually, before we get into that, we mentioned we wanted to move this to the number 2 spot. And part of the reason why is because IONQ, during these comments, responded differently. Well, NVIDIA is an investor, Microsoft's an investor in the company of IONQ. IONQ took this approach, and as soon as those comments came out, they changed their website to Quantum is right now. Quantum is now. Quantum computing has the potential to change the world, and IONQ is leading the way. You can see how they talk about better battery materials. There's a really good example that I bring up time and time again because I don't think people really understand. They were able to take 30 million data points from 15, 20 years worth of research on lithium-ion batteries. They had an AI run it through a quantum computer. Within 6 months, they got 7 or 8 options from those 30 million data points. 8 options for ways to improve the lithium-ion battery. From those 8 options, they found one of the solutions, their team found a solution that improved the efficiency of the lithium-ion battery by 70%. I mean, you don't have things like this. So they took, it sifted and found the solution from 20 years worth of research. In 6 months, it brought it down to 8 options, or I think it was before that, but within 6 months, they had this improved lithium ion battery. So that's going to improve all industries. That's going to improve all electric vehicles, range, and usefulness. They have 1,000 algorithmic qubits, can help revolutionize pharmaceutical industry. One of the things they talked about was binding peptide proteins. When it comes down to finding solutions for vaccines, you're going to have to go down to not just the molecular level or the chemical reaction that you might think of when you're doing classical computing, but quantum computers can go down to the atomic level, or they can go down to the ionic level and see how the electrons are interacting. As the frequency changes, as more energy happens, there's going to be the electrons are going to be moving. They're going to be going further and closer away, and they're going to there's a massive amount of computation that's needed to basically stay up to date and compute things like that. And so one of the things they're doing is they're able to take millions of different possible peptides and figure out how to bind the proteins to improve drug discovery. And that's helping with finding solutions to strains of cancer and things like that. And immediately what I think about, my mind goes to, you can see NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google Cloud, but my mind goes to immediately when I hear about that, they are most likely going to benefit from some of the stimulus from the Stargate AI. Stargate project is a new company which intends to invest $500 billion, and the people that are a part of this U.S. government unveils $500 billion Stargate alliance. The companies that are in this conversation, you got OpenAI, Sam Altman, CTO Larry Ellison, and SoftBank Sun. SoftBank Sun talks a lot about quantum computers. And quantum computers are most likely going to impact. What I'm saying is there's going to be funding most likely that's going to stimulate some of these companies. And outside of that, if you guys are familiar, this is a bill that's passing in quantum computing, and very simply put, it's $2.7 billion. It's a bill that's a 5-year bill, okay, for supporting quantum. It's Quantum Initiative Reauthorization. And so if you guys aren't familiar, that could be a stimulus we're looking forward to as well. $2.7 billion is a bill that's expected to get passed. If you go into the details of the bill and you go down, you can see some of the companies that are set to benefit from this. And one of the companies mentioned, there's a few companies. One of the companies mentions is Microsoft. The other one is IonQ. And you even have IonQ applauding the Senator Maria Cantwell in her efforts to reauthorize the National Quantum Initiative. So that's something to look at. You can see Microsoft as well. Microsoft being a big investor in IonQ. So the reason I say that for IonQ, when we're looking at it here, you see some of their partnerships. It seems that their trapped ion technology, their quantum cores, it says uses nature's qubits, atomic ions, identical, perfectly isolated, and naturally quantum ions provide unparalleled performance. They're not only building the computers and they're getting the funding, and that looks like very promising, as you can see, but they're also having the quantum cloud made for developers. So they're going deep on the software side. So they got some examples of what this looks like, some Python here. And then you can also have, so you could run IonQ. That's going to be crazy. AWS here, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. Now, one of the things to consider, apparently the downtime has been a little bit heavier on these companies, and that the responses that you get from the quantum computer are a little bit longer than what you might find from the quantum annealing QBTS. So we'll get into that. So IonQ, where it's at right now, you can see it has this trend as well. And on Rigetti, when I was doing this trend, it looks a little bit harder to identify possibly. But when we're on IonQ, you can see this company has a little bit more of a clear trend. You can see that it's pushed up to $54, sold down in this crash here, and then recovered most of the crash before selling back down. And so I see this as maybe a little bit of an overextension there, but now very healthy to get back down into this range. And so with IONQ, I think that all of the analysis points, it's at a previous support. It's nearing a previous support right here. Its overall direction looks good. And then Fibonacci, if you go down to that lowest point and we go back to, let's say, previous highs, so that would look like this. It's kind of in the same boat as Rigetti, saying like, we'd like to see a bounce here to validate that continuation. So that would be a bounce up into the $35 range, would have a lot more confirmation that we would see it continue up. So again, that $35 range would indicate more that we're seeing it continue in the direction it's going. Otherwise, a stock has a greater chance of continuing in the direction it's going than reversing. And right now, the direction that it's going is down. You could see just over the past few weeks, it has been starting to develop a trend down. You could see that it's getting lower highs right there and then lower lows pretty clearly. And so now at this overall trend, let's see if it breaks out. Let's see if it starts to push up. These are some of the trends that we would identify very clearly when we were on our way up to the highs. When we were looking at this trend, for example, let's drop this down. We were looking at these trends. A lot of times we'd see it sell down. We'd say, okay, so the overall trend is this way. This is a downtrend. Let's see if it bounces. And a lot of times it would bounce when we play the swing. And then again and again. And then there was that Fed sell-off. It was a little exaggerated, but we played some of these swings and it got back into pattern. So right now, where it is right now, the overall trend is looking like it's going to be like this. And here is the swing down. Is it going to bounce and continue up? If so, we might have a lot of opportunities here in the next week to trade IONQ. So their financials, I believe they're kind of in a similar boat as Rigetti. And so some of their financials are negative. So you could see IONQ stock. And their financials, they got a $4 billion or $6.8 billion market cap. They've been beating their revenue, so that's good. The revenue is up over 100% year over year, but still a negative net income. So it looks like they're pulling in somewhere around like 36 million or over $40 million a year. So they're starting to see revenue increase. You can see it's up 100% year over year. Their net profit margins are increasing, up 42%. So we just have to see that earnings per share starts to look better and that their net income starts to close a little bit. We see that, get into the positive, because right now that's a negative number that you don't like to see. You'd like to see it more balanced out. But of course, in the research phase, that's something we have to account for. So as we get into IONQ, again, we'll be watching it closely at market open. We'll see if this is getting to a point where it recovers and bounces. And right now, that EMA, that blue line, is starting to act as a resistance. If it pushes up above it, that would also indicate it more of a support. Because right now, it dropped below that 200-day moving average. We know when it breaks above this EMA, it's oftentimes going to act bullish. When it's below, it could be bearish. That's just how it rolls. So right now, it's below that EMA. If it breaks up above it, start to see it confirm this as what could be a rising support for the overall direction of IONQ, then I'd really like to get into it this coming week. Okay, so for IONQ, there's some contracts. I know they're with NASA. I think it's they're with Microsoft. There's some other contracts. So overall, a lot of really good things happening with the company. Lockheed Martin's a partner as well. University of Maryland, Oak Ridge National. They're in some laboratories and research centers too. And you see Hyundai as well, which is cool. Okay, so let's get into QBTS. QBTS is the one we'll be watching this week very closely. We start covering it a little bit more than usual this week because, well, it started to continue its trend a little bit faster than some of these other companies. You can see this overall direction not really looking like it's at a support and we're like, oh, is it going to continue up? No, it's actually only continued up. Even in this consolidation phase, it started to develop a trend. So while the other companies, a lot of them, like for example, Rigetti, when it was consolidating from left to right, there was no trend up. It was just, here is this consolidation from left to right. When we look at QBTS, this consolidation actually was more or less congruent with the overall direction. And so right now, maybe it sells back down and looks like a similar hey, is this going to bounce in the overall direction like how we're seeing with the IONQ and Rigetti? But also at the same time, it just broke up above this resistance. See this resistance right here? So this is a resistance right here. It broke out above the 200-day moving average, which indicates bullish momentum. It broke out above the EMA. Now it's sold back down from 822, and it's at this previous resistance. So what do we know? Previous resistance oftentimes acts as support. You can see it in an uptrend. For example, here's a resistance, right? That's resistance. It acted as a support in a bullish trend. Where's our next resistance? Here's a resistance right here. You see this level? Oh, what do you know? It's a support for the next level. These are things that happen quite often, and you can also see it here. A little bit more of a spike, maybe an overextension, but there's also a resistance right here. And it was acting as a support. Now, of course, here's Jensen's comments. That's where you saw things sell off. And over the course of a few weeks, along with the rest of the market, we saw it sell back down. But overall direction continuing. And now we're seeing this direction continue. And now so maybe this previous resistance, that's a little bit of an overextension. Maybe we see it sell back down to here, kind of getting back down to this $6.50 range. And that would indicate more of that bullish continuation. Now, if it sells back down, it'd still be healthy to see it get back down to the lower sixes, but I think it could make a lot of sense that it does bounce here around 650, or even the hyper bullish case would be that it's going to stay above this more exaggerated resistance and actually continue from here, consolidate above that $7 level. But we'll be watching it really close to see how it reacts right at market open, because again, a lot of the biggest moves happen in those first few hours of the day. So that's what we like to watch. And that's where a lot of these moves take place. I mean, if we go into it on a closer basis and we look at some of the dips on these stocks, I mean, let's take a look at this. When we had, this is a big day right here. You could see this is basically market open at 6 a.m. It sold down to 760. That was a dip before recovering up to $9. Is that in the same day? That's in the same day. So those swings right there, that's a 30% swing. There's some other examples. This looks like a dip. When was this? Right at market open. So right at 7 a.m., this thing opened basically at 650. It sold down to $7 right here. It sold down to $7. And then in the same day, so we're on, what is this? December 23rd. So let's not go past December 23rd. This is the whole day, right there. That's the whole day. It basically pushed up 24% from the dip. So when something is an uptrend in these quantum computing, it's easy to get discouraged right when you see it at market open. You're like, oh, if you're holding it, you might say, I want to sell or something like that. Because yeah, a lot of the dips happen at market open. So that's prevalent in the quantum space. But at the same time, if you recognize that, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that can present themselves. If you guys would like to watch us trade live at market open, again, I would encourage you to check out StockMate because we go live. We have a sale there. Second link below. So when it comes down to, I've done some research. And when it comes down to QBTS, the thing about QBTS is they have the same, and I start with the bad here because out of all the quantum companies, you could see, well, they're not as bad as IONQ from a negative net income standpoint, but they're not hitting revenue or earnings per share. So they have some good partnerships. We could get into it, but they're not hitting revenue. They're not hitting earnings per share. And you can see that their net profit margins are down about 40%. Again, not as bad as IONQ, but I don't know if you guys want to invest in something that is that far off. The way that I see it is all these companies were buying what could be. And so all these companies most likely are going to show some negative correlation. The other thing to note is that they also have some partnerships that could change this revenue extremely fast. We're talking positive revenue very quickly. And some of the partnerships that they have include MasterCard. So if we could go over here, See, MasterCard is a partner with D-Wave, and this is a Quantum Leap. They've had this partnership for a while. I'd like to know how much revenue is being generated, and we'll be watching them closely in their upcoming earnings. They have an event just about 3 days after their earnings report that they have March 27th, and then they have this big event called Qubits that's coming up. And if we go over, let's see what other institutional ownership looks like in this company. So you can see BlackRock, Vanguard are also companies that bought big. They all bought big at the end of the year towards the end of the year for quantum computing. And it's a lot of the same investors. You don't see Schwab. Oh, you do see Schwab. Do you see State Street? State Street as well. So Goldman Sachs as well. So the investments from institutions do tell you that they're looking at these companies with optimism. They bought basically December 31st in this area here. They haven't made a profit yet. So they're most likely would like to drive the stock up more. It would make a lot of sense that all those companies want to see the stock go up. So we started with the negative in D-Wave, but the D-Wave partnerships look really good. And if you go to their site, you'll see Power Quantum Computing. You'll see this new event in Scottsdale where they're going to be unveiling some things. And then you also can see that they're the only quantum annealing, they have the biggest quantum annealing quantum computer, which means that they're going to have some good scalability as far as through the cloud and getting solutions fast. So you can see complex problems, useful solutions. Innovative organizations are working with D-Wave to build quantum and hybrid quantum applications that are delivering measurable outcomes today. They are solving complex optimization problems, advancing research, and exploring quantum AI. What problems could you solve with access to the largest quantum computers in the world? You can see they have some partnerships. Pattison Food Group expends 80% less time and effort on creating complex employee schedules. You can see Ford Audison builds production schedules 83% faster. So they're in the scheduling space here. NTT Docomo improved network performance by 15% as a result of using their quantum computers. Going beyond classical computing, one thing that's really good for their marketing is that they are building rapport with me as an investor and everyone else by measuring how much of a production increase or how much percentage of efficiency they're seeing improve in these companies. I think that's really important to note. Those are things that investors should be doing. Another thing is this event that they're having, we'll see how much goes into this event at Scottsdale. But this is something that if you're planning on going to this event, you might want to consider it as timely. They're having it 3 days right after their earnings report. Why is that? Is it because they're not so optimistic about earnings and they would like to have a good event where they can have some content and really good things for investors to talk about despite negative earnings? Now, and there's two things about that. The first thing is that could be seen as, what do the earnings look like? They're not going to be as good. Is that why they're having the event? But the other thing that you could speculate, or not speculate, just say, if that's how they're thinking, that's a company that you want to invest in, because that means they're watching the stock. As an investor, you want to know that the company is watching the stock, that they're thinking about these things. They're saying, hey, we got to keep our stock like stabilized. Earnings, it's going to be a while. How do we, still keep the stock like getting momentum? Let's host a big event and let's do it. Let's show people where this is going and let's get people excited about the future. And let's really educate people and maybe even get all of our investors to come to the event and start covering it. And it can increase some awareness, and potentially we'll share insights, brainstorm new ideas, it says, and forge lasting partnerships, all while enjoying luxurious amenities, which it is luxurious. I'm excited for that. I think we're staying right there at the Phoenician. And so those are things that we're looking forward to. It says it's a must-attend event for anyone looking to harness the power of quantum. And so whether it's because they're not expecting positive earnings and they're like, yeah, well, let's have an event, or not, it's still probably a pretty good timed event, because if they do good earnings and they have that event, imagine how much that's going to do for the stock as well. So we'll keep that in mind. A lot of the companies seemed quite optimistic about the upcoming earnings. At least that's how it sounded at CES. They didn't say we're going to crush earnings, but I think it was IonQ, or it might have been Microsoft, or it might have been IBM, but I know it was said from one of those executives on stage. I wish I was like recording it. I recorded some of it, but that was like one piece that we didn't get. But if you want the full coverage, it's on my channel. And basically they said, we think that earnings are really going to surprise you. And you're going to see how much quantum computers are getting used. And some of the statistics were like millions of computations last year. IBM reported $1 billion in cumulative revenue for quantum. They're seeing like increased usage. But let's really see like how these earnings look. This is going to be one of the biggest earnings seasons to start 2025. And some of the biggest ones are going to see how things develop in quarter 2, quarter 3 as well. But definitely a lot riding on these first earnings for quarter 4 last year. But I definitely think, yeah, it just makes sense that we'll see that impact. So again, we'll be watching QBTS, and I'd like to keep you guys updated on it. If you guys have any comments on QBTS, leave them in the description, or sorry, the comment section below. If you're an investor in the company, in any of these companies, short term, let me know. Let me know your timeline. Long term, short term, what are you anticipating for these companies? And I would love to know your thoughts below. If I earned your thumbs up, make sure to hit that like button. Do consider subscribing. And again, if you want to join us at Market Open on Monday, it's the second link down below. That's StockMate. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all. And I'll see you again. We're almost to 20,000 subscribers. That's amazing. Do consider subscribing. That's crazy. I appreciate you all. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.